I turned 70 the night my son tried to take my life. On paper, in front of witnesses, the dining room smelled of fried chicken, that comfort that hides tragedy. To Mom, Daniel said, raising his glass, for everything she's done. Everyone clinked glasses. My granddaughter's bracelet clinked against the crystal. The cake waited on the sideboard. The man in the navy blue jacket, who wasn't family and never once took off his leather bag, did so too. Before dessert, Daniel added, we need to do something important while everyone's here. He glanced at his wife. She nodded slightly, something I'd long ago learned to distrust. The stranger stepped forward. I'm Mr. Hall. I just need a few signatures. He laid out the papers like a salesman, a petition for emergency guardianship, a letter from the doctor, unsigned but properly worded, a temporary power of attorney with my name written on it. My daughter-in-law pulled 2 driver's licenses from the cupboard. Witnesses, she said cheerfully. They dropped by from church. Why? I asked, surprised by how even my voice sounded. Why today? Daniel sighed. Mom, your memory. Last week you put sugar in the salt shaker again. You called me Michael, my late husband's name. He didn't hesitate. We're just trying to help. I looked at the documents, at the already written date, at the space for my signature. And the notary? I asked. The man in the suit jacket raised his hand. Right here, he said. How could my own son do this to me? What helped me was that I had prepared for a moment I hoped would never come. 2 months ago, after he lost my tax form, I bought a small keychain-shaped recorder and tucked it under the carpet. Last week, I transferred my savings to an account only I can access and put a letter with dates and names in a safe deposit box. Yesterday, I saw my doctor, my actual doctor, and asked her to write down what she'd been telling me for years. Mild arthritis, blood pressure like a woman who still walks every morning. Of course, I said, pulling my chair closer. If it's that simple, we'll take our time and read every line aloud. Daniel frowned. My sister-in-law fidgeted. Mr. Hall checked his watch. The 2 witnesses, churchwomen who prefer hearsay to hymns, smiled discreetly, like people convinced they were doing God a favor. I picked up a pen, uncapped it, and smiled at each of them in turn, as if blessing my desk. But first, I said, let's start with a question for the record. What record? My son asked. The one that proves who planned this and when, I replied, touching the table runner with 2 fingers like a pianist finding the first note. Shall we begin? The room fell silent. It wasn't fear that calmed me, but the insult. The sugar bowl, the lost bills, the meticulous accounts of how I repeated the words so carefully, so rehearsed. He wanted my house, my savings, and the easy right to call his theft a matter of caring for my loved ones. He wanted to be called a good son while I delved into the case. One thing bothers me, I said. If you're so concerned about my memory, why did you schedule this for Sunday? Court is adjourned. Mr. Hall blinked. This is only preliminary information. Preliminary, I repeated, tasting the word. So we're playing court at my table. My granddaughter, Lily, stared at her father. She is 17 and has watched more than she says. She opened her phone, slid it under her napkin. Daniel cleared his throat. Mom, you told the neighbor? You forgot where you parked at the grocery store. I did, I said, because a teenager in a lifted truck parked over the line and I had to climb in from the passenger side like a gymnast. I told Mrs. Green because she asked why I was laughing, and I thought humor still lived in this house. Let's stay on track, Mr. Hall interjected. If you sign these, it will just make things easier. For everyone easier, I murmured, slipping the pen cap back on. For whom? My heart was beating calmly, like a metronome I'd wound myself. Behind it, though, the old question throbbed. When did love turn into appetite? When did a boy I carried through fever nights decide I was a door to be unlocked? I stood. All right, I said. Let's read. I read the top paragraph slowly, then stopped. Daniel, it says you witnessed me wandering at night. When? He flushed. 2 weeks ago, Lily and I came by and you were in the yard. I was covering my rosemary, I said. The forecast called for frost. You said goodnight and took a picture. Would you like me to show it? Lily's face twisted. She looked down. Actually, I continued, I can show it to all of you. I lifted the table runner. The tiny blue light blinked. I set the key fob on the silver tray and pressed a button. My voice filled the room, recorded the previous Thursday. Daniel, don't bring papers to my house. If you do, I'll have to call it what it is. His reply, muffled but clear. Mom, don't be dramatic. Just sign. It'll keep the house safe if a pause. Before the creditors come. The witnesses' smiles died. Mr. Hall shifted his weight. Creditors? I asked, as if I hadn't listened to that recording 10 times already to dull its sting. What creditors, Daniel? He shook his head. This is out of context. I sat back down. I agree. We need context. I reached under the chair cushion and pulled out a thin envelope I had paperclipped to the wood. I slid it next to his stack. Here's mine. A letter from Dr. Leland dated yesterday morning. Patient is fully oriented to person, place, time, and situation. No cognitive impairment observed, initialed on every page. She keeps a copy. So does the bank. So does the police officer who will knock at exactly 8 if I don't answer my phone with a word we agreed on. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. The clock thudded over the piano. 7:48. Now, I said, settling my napkin, let's talk about why you need guardianship so quickly. He looked at his wife. She looked at the notary. The notary looked at his watch. Say it, I said. Say the word that explains what you've turned me into. He didn't. Lily did, her voice very small. Dad, is this about the restaurant loan? The room took a breath, then held it. Mr. Hall coughed into his fist. Daniel pushed back his chair. This is ridiculous, he snapped. Mom, if you won't sign, you're leaving us no choice. Do you hear yourself? I asked. No choice but to take my life away because you took a loan you couldn't repay? He stood. I'm trying to protect you. By selling my house from under me, I pointed at the petition packet. There's a section checked here, authority to sell real property. That is not protection. That is harvest. He stared at me as if I had given away a magic trick. Maybe I had. Maybe the trick was simply this: not to be scared of your own child. The doorbell rang. No one moved. Mr. Hall was the first to compose himself. We'll finish later, he muttered, snapping his briefcase. The witnesses hovered, unsure whether to pray. Daniel's jaw worked like a door with a jammed hinge. I folded my hands and waited for the second ring. It came. Bright and ordinary. I stood and went to the door. When I opened it, Officer Keating from the neighborhood patrol smiled at me like a neighbor. Evening, Mrs. Whitmore. You doing all right? I am, I said. Would you mind coming in for a moment? I think you should hear something. He stepped inside. The notary's face went pale in a way that made me think he already knew Officer Keating. The two witnesses shifted toward the hallway as if they could disappear into my coat closet. Everything okay here? The officer asked. I pressed play on the recorder again. I let it run through Daniel's sentence about creditors. I let it run through his wife's whisper, barely audible until the room fell silent. If she keeps the house, we lose everything. I let it run long enough to catch Mr. Hall's instruction, the one he'd offered while he thought I was in the kitchen. Don't let her read. Keep her talking. We need signatures tonight. Then I stopped it. Do you feel safe, ma'am? Officer Keating asked carefully. I do now, I said, but I don't feel respected. And I don't feel loved by certain people in my dining room. I looked at my son. He wouldn't look back. Officer Keating nodded. Would you like these folks to leave? Yes, I said. Except my granddaughter. The officer tilted his head. Folks, you heard her. He didn't issue orders. He dispensed gravity. Mr. Hall tucked his papers so quickly he dropped a clip. The witnesses murmured about prayer chains and fled. My daughter-in-law lifted her purse, found her composure, and lost it again at the front step. Daniel lingered. Mom, he said in a choked voice. "You'll regret this." "I already do," I answered. "You just don't know what this is." He went out into the cold. The night folded around him, the door closed with a soft click I felt all the way up my arm. Lily sat perfectly still. The cake had slumped against its own frosting, candle wax striped the lace like sap. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For not stopping him." Her eyes were wet. "He said it was to help you." He sounded so certain. "People are loudest when they need to drown their own fear," I said. "Come with me." We carried the cake to the kitchen and set it in the sink in case the frosting decided to fling itself to freedom. I poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to her. The clock ticked us deeper into the evening. "Do you want to call Mom?" she asked, meaning her mother, my daughter-in-law. "Or the others?" "No," I said. "We'll call someone else." I took my phone and tapped a number I had written on a sticky note and tucked behind the flour canister because life is just a school for hiding things in plain sight. A woman answered on the second ring, clipped and professional. "A PS hotline." "I'd like to report attempted financial exploitation," I said. "By family." I gave my address, I gave names, I laid the recorder on the counter and let the operator hear proof that what I was saying was not the bitterness of age. "Thank you," the woman said, and her voice softened. "We'll send a social worker by tomorrow. Do you feel safe tonight?" "Yes," I said, and then added what felt like an oath. "And I plan to stay that way." Lily squeezed my hand. Her fingers trembled. Mine didn't. Not anymore. The next shock arrived the next afternoon, not with more papers, but with an email forward from my bank officer, the one who has known me since she gave me a free calendar with puppies on it. The subject line read, "Urgent verification." Attached was a request to change my mailing address and to authorize online access for my guardian, effective immediately. It had been submitted at midnight. The IP address belonged to Daniel's restaurant. My breath left me in a quiet, elegant way, like a guest excusing herself early and closing the door without a sound. So that was the plan after all, a Sunday dinner to bully the signature, a midnight paperwork trail to cement the lie, and by Monday, a new guardian with the keys to my life. Instead of replying, I went to the bank in person. I put on the red coat my late husband liked because he said it made me look like a cardinal against snow. I carried Dr. Leland's letter, my recorder, and a folder I had prepared 2 weeks ago when the feeling that something was closing in on me became a fact. The folder had copies of every property tax receipt, my deed, and a letter I had written to myself 5 months earlier after the first, "Mom, you're forgetting things" conversation. It began, "If you are reading this, you are not losing your mind. You are being convinced to lose it." At the bank, we sat in a small room with a plant that looked like it wanted more light. My officer, Jenna, listened. She forwarded the attempted change request to their fraud unit and added a flag on my accounts. Then she did something that surprised me. She printed a sheet and slid it across the table. "This is a list of your automatic payments on," she said. "Last week, your utilities were put on paper billing. That's sometimes a tactic. Mail can be redirected." I nodded. "He wants to create a mess and then present himself as the cleaner." She nodded back. "I've seen it before." She tapped the paper. "You still want your accounts accessible?" "Yes," I said, "but only to me." I paused. "And to one other person, but not yet." When I came home, Lily was on the porch steps, arms around her knees. Her father's car idled at the curb. He didn't get out. "He wants to talk to you," she said. "I'm not ready to listen." He said he'd wait. We let him wait. We made tea. We watched the steam ghost out of the mugs as the sun laid a pale hand across the garden. Finally, I walked down the steps. Daniel got out. He looked older than he had the night before, not in his face exactly, but in the way his shoulders hung wrong on his body. "Mom," he said, "please, I messed up." "You did," I said. "And you didn't just mess up. You planned?" He ran a hand through his hair. "I panicked. The restaurant, There was a supplier. We signed a personal guarantee. They're coming after the house, your house, I said. Not mine. I know, he grimaced. But if I just, I prompted, and the word felt like a trapdoor under both our feet. If you just put things in my name for a while. He lifted his hands. I would have given it back. You would have said you would, I said quietly. And you would have believed yourself when you said it. That's the problem. He swallowed. I grew up watching you fix everything. I thought you'd fix this too. I am, I said. Just not the way you expected. He looked at the window where Lily sat with her chin on her hand, watching. Please don't cut me off from her. I haven't, I said. You have. He flinched like I'd thrown a rock and he'd expected a flower. What happens now? I didn't answer him, I answered myself. Now I protect my life with the same devotion I used to spend on other people's. He nodded as if he understood, but he didn't. How could he? He had never lived inside a day that could be taken away with a signature. That evening, the social worker came, a woman with a calm face and a notebook that folded like a book you might want to read. She listened. She made copies of the recordings. She scheduled a follow-up. She asked if I wanted to file for a protective order. I said yes. I wanted the piece of paper, not because I believed it was armor, but because I wanted to teach my son what a boundary looks like when it gets tired of being an idea. I slept with the window cracked. The house creaked like a ship finding its map. Over the next week, the story widened. The church ladies who had served as witnesses left a voicemail, breathless and remorseful, saying they hadn't known what the papers were and that they wanted to make it right. Mr. Hall called and did not leave a message. The notary emailed to clarify that he had not, in fact, notarized anything. He had merely been available. Daniel's wife sent texts with too many periods. Lily came over every day after school and sat at my table doing homework as if the house itself were studying how to become safer. Then the second shock arrived, the kind that doesn't clang like a dropped pan, but lands like a whisper. A letter from the county recorder. A packet had been submitted, a quitclaim deed, transferring my house to a newly formed trust with Daniel as trustee. The signature was mine. The notary seal was the same shape as the one in my kitchen that night. The recording date was 2 days later. I read the letter twice. Then I took a long breath that felt like I was drawing a chalk line across the day. I drove to the recorder's office with the letter, my driver's license, and a copy of my signature from the back of a checkbook. The clerk, a young man with careful hair, looked at the packet on his screen and shook his head slowly. "This is being flagged," he said. "We got a notice from the bank about possible fraud." He squinted. "Ma'am, did you sign this?" "No," I said. He nodded and printed me a form. "Then you'll want this affidavit. And I'll add a note to the file. There's a hold, thank you," I said, and the words scratched my throat like I'd swallowed gravel and called it medicine. I stepped out into the daylight and dialed Lily. "Do me a favor," I said. "Go to the cedar box on the top shelf of my closet. Bring it to the kitchen, but don't open it." When I got home, she had done as I asked. We set the box on the table and I found the small brass key that used to live in my sewing kit. Inside were the papers my husband and I had signed 10 years earlier, and then forgotten we'd been wise enough to sign, the deed to a trust in my name as trustee with Lily as successor. The house was already in it. The quitclaim was a forgery layered on top of a wall. "He doesn't know," I said. "He never learned how to read what he was trying to steal." We made copies. I put the originals back in the box and moved the box to a place Daniel would never think to look, the freezer under a bag of peas that had long ago turned into green hail. The protective order hearing was scheduled for Friday morning. I told myself I wouldn't dramatize it. I told myself I would let the facts speak like witnesses who didn't need to be coached. I wore the red coat again. I carried the recorder and a printed transcript of that night complete with timestamps. I carried Dr. Leland's letter. I carried one other thing I wasn't sure I'd need, a single photograph of Daniel as a baby, asleep on my chest, his mouth a small, hopeful O. I slipped it into my wallet face out like a saint. We waited on a bench outside the small courtroom until our names were called. The judge was a woman my age with hair pulled back so tight, it looked like it was whispering secrets to her scalp. She listened. She asked a few questions. Daniel spoke first, a mistake he'd learned from men who assume their voices are keys. "I was worried about my mother's health," he said. I acted like any son would. I let the recorder reply for me. The judge's mouth tightened. She looked at him and then at me. "Do you feel unsafe?" she asked. "I feel targeted," I said. "And that feeling has a habit of becoming danger if left alone." She granted the order. 90 days, no contact, except through an attorney, no approach within 100 yards. She said it was temporary pending an investigation. I nodded. I thanked her. I walked out into the corridor and leaned against the cool wall until the pressure behind my eyes retreated from wave to tide. Justice is rarely lightning. It is more often a series of stones placed carefully in a river until, finally, there is a way across. The days after that were work, real work, not the kind that gets you a paycheck, but the kind that gives you back your own name. I changed the locks. I installed a camera by the porch and one over the garage. I set up alerts on the county recorder's site for my address. I moved my medicine into a locked box, even though the only person who might switch bottles now was me. I taught myself to scan every envelope as if it could carry a spell. I took my morning walks as if I was learning new streets in a city where I'd lived for 40 years. Lily kept coming. She brought her algebra and her aching heart. Sometimes she talked, sometimes she ate toast and said nothing, and that was the talking. Once I found her standing in the hall staring at the framed photograph of Daniel at his high school graduation. She touched the glass, the way you touch a door to see if it's locked. "Do you hate him?" she asked without turning. "I hate what he did," I said. "And I hate that he did it to us." "Where does the love go?" she whispered. "It waits," I said. "And I don't know if that's noble or foolish. But it waits." The investigation moved. The social worker came again and took a longer statement. The bank sent a letter confirming a fraud hold on any changes to my accounts. The county recorder emailed that the quitclaim had been rejected for irregularities and referred to the district attorney. Mr. Hall's notary license, I learned, had been provisionally suspended pending inquiry. The church ladies delivered a casserole and a written apology I folded and put under the magnet shaped like a sun on my refrigerator, not because I needed it, but because I wanted to practice accepting what people offer when they finally see themselves. Then the call came I had not expected to receive in this life, the supplier's attorney, a woman whose voice sounded like gravel made smooth by a river. She said she'd reviewed the attempted guardianship and the forged quitclaim. She said the company did not want to be part of anything that smelled like elder abuse. She said, "Mrs. Whitmore, will you sit down with me?" We met at a coffee shop where the chairs were too low for the tables. She laid out Daniel's loan documents. The numbers were terrible, but not infinite. The personal guarantee was his and his wife's. My name did not appear. She tapped one clause with her pen. "He told me you'd agreed to indemnify," she said. "He said he could get you to sign something." I told him not to try. He did it anyway. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I've seen this pattern," she said, "and because I want to get paid, not end up in a news story." We talked in no terms. She agreed to pursue Daniel and his wife only. I agreed to nothing for them. I agreed to nothing for myself. It was the easiest negotiation of my life because all I brought to the table was no. I went home and stood in my kitchen and looked around like a woman who's returned from a hurricane to find her walls still upright. I cut a slice of the cake we'd abandoned the night of the ambush. It was stale and perfect. I ate it over the sink like a girl. The last act did not come with sirens. It came with a letter with the Attorney General's crest in the corner, informing me that charges had been filed for attempted fraudulent conveyance and notary misconduct. It came with a text from Daniel's wife that began, "I'm sorry," and ended, "Please don't ruin him." It came with Lily's face at my door, raw with hope that her father could be a person she could trust again someday. "I don't want to ruin him," I said. I want to ruin what he thought he could do to me. I sat at my table and wrote a statement for the court. I did not burn him down with adjectives. I described the night. I attached the transcript. I attached the letter from the bank. I attached my doctor's note. I attached a photograph of my garden in winter because I wanted the judge to remember that things can look dead and still be alive under the frost. At the hearing, Daniel's attorney tried to make me sound like a woman obsessed with paperwork. I let the recorder answer again. I let the notary suspension speak. I let the truth do the heavy lifting. The judge issued an order voiding any fraudulent filings on my property and extending the protective order for a year. She recommended counseling for the family if the family wanted to remain a family. Outside the courthouse, the air felt newly washed. Lily took my hand. "Can we go home?" she asked. "We can," I said, "and then we can decide what home means for us now." In the weeks that followed, Daniel called once through his attorney. He asked if I would consider helping with a payment plan. I said I would consider nothing until he made amends to Lily for using her to pretend love at my table. He did not call again. I heard he sold the restaurant. I heard he took a job managing another man's kitchen. I heard he moved into an apartment with a view of nothing special. Sometimes justice is a list of ordinary addresses. Spring came. The rosemary threw up new green as if it had never been touched by frost. I started a small class at the community center teaching women how to read their deeds, their bank statements, their own instincts. We practiced saying no in a room that clapped when the word landed like a flag. I told them that guardianship can be a gift and a weapon, and the difference is consent. I told them the best time to plan is before you're scared. I told them that love is not a notarized signature. On my 71st birthday, Lily set out a cake on the sideboard. No strangers stood in the doorway. No briefcases tilted open like traps. She lit the candles and looked at me over the tiny flames. "What did you wish for last year, Beati?" she asked. "Courage," I said. "And this year?" "Peace," I said, "but the kind with a backbone." We cut the cake. We ate it at the table where the recorder had once turned my house into a witness. I took a bite and laughed. The sugar was in the sugar jar, the salt was in the salt jar. My memory was where I had left it, inside me, not for sale. If there's a lesson I'd paint on the side of the church where the witnesses like to hum, it's this. They can't take your life if you refuse to hand them the pen. And if they try, you don't have to shout. You just have to write the truth in ink and hold it up to the light until even the people who would rather look away finally see it. I keep the key fob, not because I like listening to old wounds, but because I like the weight of it in my hand. It reminds me that preparation is not paranoia. It reminds me that a woman who looks like a grandmother at a birthday table can also be a wall. It reminds me that when someone raises a toast and the notary is already waiting in the kitchen, you can still stand, clear your throat, and say the one word that turns a trap into a trial. Number.
My grandma told me this story. I have many more stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the most interesting things.